Yeah, I'm hitting live. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting in just a second. Let me open up my voice recorder. Got a packed show today, so strap in. And I finished all my tea just before we started. That's really sad. Well, every week this is a problem. I just take all the contrast away. You take enough contrast away, it just goes grey. Whoa, that's not right. Okay. No. I was messing around with mine. I've put it back to normal now. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why it does it. I really don't. You're a lot paler on my screen now. Now they
I'm
can.
okay with that. I think it looks okay.
Okay, cool. Are we ready to start?
I suppose. God, we're so vain. Let me get the notes up. I gotta mute that and shrink it down. Where's the voice recorder? My God, there's just too much stuff going on here. All right, I am now recording.
I am now recording as well.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 224 for May 7th, 2021. Hey everyone, Daniel Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. Another busy week. Actually, I had a busier week behind the scenes than actually on the site. So there's a lot of stuff coming next week. So I can't talk about that now, but a lot of stuff coming next week. Nothing surface. Don't think that, but a lot of stuff happening. This week, though, we'll be talking about Windows 10X. Yeah, maybe on the back burner indefinitely, according to a new report from Petrie. So we're going to talk about that, implications of it, why they would do that, and why they just can't quit Windows 10, apparently. I feel like Microsoft is just incapable of paying attention to any other operating system besides Windows 10.
Anything, even with anything like remotely modern, just cannot be done by Microsoft. It has to be always legacy all the time.
Yep. We'll talk about Intel chips, fabs in China. We'll just spend a few minutes on that. It's a very kind of complicated topic, but if you watched 60 Minutes last Sunday, the head of Intel was on TV and they were analyzing the chip shortage that's going on and Intel's role in it, what can be done, and it's just kind of an interesting story, especially how it affects our industry that we're in. Windows 10 news. Zach will give us the latest on what's happening with Windows 10, the insider builds, and all that kind of jazz. We have some general news too, because just so many smaller things happens during the week. So we'll kind of get to that. That includes things like iOS is now getting the new version of Edge. So we talked a little bit about that before with Android. We'll talk about what that means and how that is. Smart Things from Samsung is finally now on Windows 10, part of the new laptops, and we'll talk about that. Epic versus Apple. You may be wondering why we're going to talk about Epic versus Apple. Turns out Microsoft is a witness in this case, and a lot of dirt has come out because they've had to produce emails, and it's just been kind of funny. None of it is really like, I don't know, super. It's just more interesting. It's more.
It's just more. It's just insider baseball, just general day-to-day Microsoft business. I think that's kind of interesting to lots of us externally.
Exactly. Jez Corden, our games editor, loaded up Office into the new Edge on Xbox and used a new Razer Turret keyboard and mouse to basically write the article on. And it's an interesting conversation about whether or not Microsoft should focus on turning your Xbox into a productivity machine. The answer is probably no, but it's still kind of a cool idea when we talk about mobile computers and or just any kind of computation these days. Also, HP Elite Folio, one of the more exciting devices announced at CES, is finally in my hands. And yes, I'm going to try to do a quick review on that. I say that, but I think at least 8 to 10 devices I have to review right now. And it's really racking me. I feel like it's overwhelming. Like I don't know how to focus anymore. But we'll talk about the Folio because it is a Windows 10 on ARM, Snapdragon 8CX Gen 2 device, and you can get it with 5G, and it just has what I would argue as probably the coolest form factor of any PCs available today. And HP just, I keep saying it, but like I just really love what they're doing in the PC space. I think their designs are some of the best around. And so I'll talk a little bit about that device and whether or not you should consider getting one. And then we'll see if we have, thing of the week. I actually do have a thing of the week, so we'll see if Zach thinks of one. But that is the schedule for today. So we'll try to do that all in 90 minutes. Ideally, it would be 60 minutes, but last I checked, I yabber too much on here. But we'll see. Zach, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
It's been a week. It's certainly been a week at Windows Central, but I'm not too bad. How are you?
I agree. I've had sometimes 3 meetings a day with companies, briefings and previews, and
some of them less friendly than others.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, occasionally you get yelled at by companies. Actually, that is how my Monday started. I can't talk about why I was getting yelled at, but yeah, sometimes things happen unintended. But that's just part of the job. It's always kind of fun that way. But yeah, it's other than that, just it's a good problem to have right now that PCs are so popular.
Yeah.
And every company is just foot on the gas, and there's just so much momentum going on. And following years of hearing about iPads and post PC and everything like that, it's just we're kind of in this new era. And you're going to see a lot of momentum here and a lot of innovation, I think. And there's just it's all good if you're into computing. The question, of course, is will it last? I'm actually surprised we're still kind of talking about all this stuff, because the idea was when the pandemic started winding down, which it is, we would have seen the drop in demand for PCs. And, we had an extensive conversation about this last week, I think it was, or the week before, regarding iMac. And also talk about the new MacBooks and how well they did, right? But how the entire industry is just doing well. But I'm curious to see if we'll still be in the fall talking about this, or whether those numbers drop off, because computers are expensive. People don't upgrade and buy them. I would say like a smartphone, but even smartphones now are on this multi-year upgrade cycle. People aren't doing it every year anymore because it's just diminishing returns. I'm just curious if, how much we're going to see change in the next few years, which I guess leads us nicely to Windows 10X, which you and I had high hopes for as being this next iteration of Windows for the next decade. It was originally set up to be a dual screen operating system. Back in 2018, we wrote an article talking about how dual screen PCs were coming. Everybody laughed at it. 2 years later, there was CES, Intel's there, Dell is there, Microsoft. Everybody's got dual screen or folding display devices like Lenovo, the X1 Fold. And Microsoft was kind of hush-hush at the time, but we knew that it was going to run Windows 10X. And then they started hitting bumps. The X1 Fold was supposed to launch with Windows 10X. That was the plan. Then it got delayed. And Lenovo was like, you know what? We've worked on this thing for so long. We're just going to release it anyway. We want feedback. And I still have that device. I haven't reviewed it because, frankly, Windows 10 is not great on it. The hardware is amazing, but it's not really Lenovo's fault. So that was the first miss. And then we heard, Microsoft wants to focus on single screen devices to go against Chrome OS. So that caused the other delay with Surface Neo. And everybody was kind of okay. We were hearing spring. And now that's not happening. Zach, catch us up to date here. This story came from Petrie. Brad Sams originated the story, and you followed up on it. So what is going on with Windows 10X, and why is this happening? I feel like
Oh,
that's it's actually a name of a podcast. But
it's it's a big question. It's also a sad story, really. So, as Dan beautifully put, Microsoft has been trying to ship Windows 10X for a long while now. First as a dual screen thing, then as a single screen thing, and it was originally it was supposed to be done in time for holiday 2020, but when they pivoted to single screens, that pushed it out another 6 to 12 months. So it was then expected to be sort of done and begin shipping this spring. So around about now would have been a good time to start seeing the first 10X devices on, traditional laptop style PCs and whatnot. But that hasn't happened either. So Microsoft stopped self-hosting Windows 10X internally back in February. And that's 2 months after 10X missed its second deadline of December, because they needed to have a final build by December so they could ship that to OEMs and have those first 10X devices start shipping in the spring. That's generally how it works. They missed that deadline, then they outright just stopped self-hosting Windows 10X internally in February. Now, I heard about this in around the same time, but I was still under the impression that they wanted to do 10X, and I just assumed that the reason they'd stopped self-hosting was because they just wanted to focus on Sun Valley for now, and that they would return to 10X at a later date. Petrie's report suggests that, in fact, 10X, they're probably not going to return to 10X. It's pretty much a done deal at this point. It's on ice, and maybe they will return to it in the far future, but they have no plan right now to ship it. So it won't be coming this year. It probably won't be coming next year, and if we ever do see a version of Windows Core OS for laptops and tablets and whatnot, it probably won't be the Windows 10X that has been announced and that we have seen so far. And that's a real shame, and it obviously puts the Surface Neo in jeopardy. It puts Microsoft's Chromebook compete strategy in jeopardy, because remember, this is what 10X was supposed to be, right? This modern new version, the future of Windows, essentially, that would first launch on these sort of Chromebook compete devices, then make its way to these unique dual screen form factor devices, and then, in the next 5 to 10 years, become the mainstream version of Windows 10. If Microsoft is putting it on hold indefinitely, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Now, the reason why they're putting it on hold is I think there's lots of different answers for this, but I think the main one primarily is that Sun Valley exists. I would be more cut up about this news if Sun Valley didn't exist, but because Sun Valley does exist, I kind of understand where Microsoft is coming from. And I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. Windows 10X has been in a weird place ever since Microsoft began working on Sun Valley for Windows 10. For those who may not know, Sun Valley is a UI effort that aims to reinvigorate the Windows 10 desktop by porting over a bunch of the best 10X features and introducing new features and stuff on top of Windows 10. And that will be coming to all Windows 10 users, all 1.3 billion users, unlike Windows 10X, which was this platform for new PCs only. If you wanted a 10X device, you would have to go out and buy one. You couldn't just install it on your existing PC. That's not the same thing with Sun Valley. Sun Valley will be coming to everybody. You'll be able to install it just like a normal Windows 10 update. So them doing Sun Valley kind of, it makes Windows 10X a less attractive sell to most people. Because while 10X still has its own benefits outside of legacy Windows, the modern UX stuff is the number one thing that they could sell to normal people. And now desktop is basically getting that anyway with Sun Valley. So the need for 10X is way less apparent now. It was way more apparent when Windows 10 had like this ugly old UI, which it still does. They've not announced Sun Valley yet, but assuming Microsoft announces Sun Valley soon, I think a lot of people will realize that, oh, okay, I see why they're not doing 10X now. It's because they're actually focused on Windows 10. And that's what I've been hearing. Microsoft has shifted strategy internally. 10X was the future. Now they've decided that actually, no, desktop is more important. We need to modernize desktop first before we even think about doing a true, modern version of Windows in the form of a Windows Core OS edition of some kind. So that's what we're going to see this year. We're going to see Microsoft focus on Windows 10. They're going to push this new Windows effort, Sun Valley, brand new UI, new features, new sounds, new iconography, new everything. Essentially, it's a Windows 11 in all but name. And Windows 10X sort of gave Microsoft a North Star for what that to shape Sun Valley for desktop, but now that's going back into its cave, and we might not see it again ever. And maybe we will see it's like a version of it in the future once sort of the hype for desktop has died down again and Sun Valley is old news. But yeah, that's sort of the TLDR for Windows 10X. It's not coming, don't expect it. Now the other question, of course, is what does that mean for Surface Neo? Oh, the answer is we don't really know. We have no definitive answer for that. But I don't see why Microsoft couldn't ship it with full Windows 10. Surface Neo is an Intel PC. You know, it has the power to run Windows. It's not like this low end sort of low powered. I mean, I guess it is sort of low powered. It's Intel Lakefield of some kind, but it can still run Windows 10. Like the Lenovo X1 Fold that Dan has is an Intel device and runs full Windows 10. And I don't think performance is the primary issue with that device. It's more the UX. Now, Sun Valley is all about updating the Windows desktop with more touch-friendly stuff for tablets, as well as catering to the desktop market. It's supposed to please everybody. So why couldn't they just wait for Sun Valley, assuming it does introduce new pen and touch experiences that make Windows more fun on tablets? Why not ship full Windows on the Surface Neo? I don't see why they couldn't. And that way it would allow them to ship the device. It's still late, so it's not holiday 2020 anymore, but earlier than 2022 or beyond, because Sun Valley is supposed to come out this fall. They could easily have the hardware ready by then. And that way they don't have to update it much, right? And then people won't complain as much that the specs are old. Because I don't think there's a new Intel Lakefield chip. I think it's the same one, but who knows at this point. So yeah, who knows what they'll do with the Neo? Maybe the Neo's dead and buried forever and ever, but I don't think it is. I still think they want to do that device, and I would hope that they ship it with full Windows rather than wait for another version of Windows Core to be ready, or ship it with Android, which I would absolutely hate to see.
And this comes down to this ongoing debate about dual screen versus foldable. So my issue is with the X1 Fold, as amazing as the hardware is that it runs full Windows 10.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a weird device. It's still a little bit thick and chunky, but the hardware innovation that they did on there is very amazing. Mm-hmm. It's just that with foldable, it's not as clear what advantage you get sometimes with Windows 10.
Right. And
in terms of running dual screen apps or something like that. And this comes down to Surface Duo and what Neo was, where they have two separate displays. And Windows is good at running on multiple displays. It already has that support built in. And so, personally speaking, just my experience with Duo and my experience with the X1 Fold, I prefer dual screens. It's way better for productivity.
Yeah. agree.
And while folding has its role, I have a Z Flip, and I love what that does. When it comes to the PC, I feel like the dual screen approach. And this is a debate because, as I've talked about before, this effort is Intel's behind this effort. We all focus on Surface Neo because it was publicly announced, but this whole initiative is Intel. And that's why they don't run ARM processors. But even there with, Dell had two prototypes. One was foldable, one was dual screen. Because quite frankly, the industry doesn't know which is better, which people would prefer. And so the idea was sort of to get both out there and kind of see what happens. And my experience so far is that with full Windows, running a foldable is not as interesting as potentially what a dual screen Windows device would be like. So in that sense, if you just took Windows 10 and, as you said, take some of the ideas in Windows 10X, brought them over, add some better gesture support, dual screen, a little bit more with the animations and how multiple apps are done, you bring that over to full Windows 10. I actually do think that could be way more interesting. There's just something about having two screens that it's just easier to manage the apps. A foldable is hard. You don't get the split thing. It doesn't work as clear. Lenovo tried with their own software, but it's still problematic.
Yeah. See, on the subject of Lenovo shipping the X1 Fold, I do wonder if maybe they had a conversation with Microsoft and said, hey, look, we want to ship this with Windows 10. And Microsoft essentially assured them that they were working on an update that would improve that form factor in the future. That wasn't 10X.
They knew.
Yeah.
So
what the plan was,
the plan was the X1 Fold was going to be 10X because when I had the first briefing in 2019, they were very.
They wouldn't say. I remember they wouldn't say what OS it was going to run, but it was very obviously going to be 10X.
But I was telling them, I was like, it's 10X, right? And they were kind of grinning. Because they knew it's sometimes tough in these meetings because we sometimes either know more than they do or we know more than we're supposed to know. And so they can't say yes or no because they're under NDA. But so we got the wing kind of like, we can't talk about that, but we knew it was going to be 10X. And then they shipped it with Windows 10 Pro. But the idea was later, after 10X had been announced, they're like, we will offer a version with
Yeah.
10X
Hmm.
kind of down the road. Um, and to put it to perspective, the X1 Fold, and I've been meaning to do a deeper piece about this and how Lenovo has been very good at putting experimental devices on the market, knowing full well, like they didn't put the Fold out there expecting it was going to sell gangbusters. In fact, they were frank when it actually became available. They're like, there's only a limited kind of quantity of these. We're not making a ton, but they do it because they want feedback. They want people to buy it, try it out, and then basically
Hmm.
tell them. And I've been kind of bad at not providing enough feedback. But partly why I haven't fully reviewed it is because I just really haven't figured out how to use it, as cool as it is. Uh, but still, yeah, getting full Windows 10 with some better gesture support, I feel like a dual screen device, a proper dual screen one, is still interesting. I don't know what the foldable displays, how those are going to play into PC and computing. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's a dead end. It just means it needs to be figured out. And if you go back to the 2-in-1, back when Surface was announced, there were so many wacky designs for computers I think people forget about. Let's go back. Acer had one where they had a display on a hinge, and they had the mouse trackpad behind the
Oh,
keyboard.
I remember that. Yeah.
I have that
Oh,
device.
you do?
I went and
Nice.
yeah, I went and bought it. Um, it was beautiful hardware, by the way. It was so cool, but it was weird to use because the display was a pull forward, which is a
Mm.
concept that came back as we saw with HP Elite, and Acer still does it, right? But they modified it. So we had that. We had Lenovo had a Helix. The display spun around,
Yeah.
so you would spin it. It was a single uh, pole like in the middle, and the display would rotate around and then lay back flat, and you can reverse it that way. Like that's a really kind of cool idea that no one really followed up on. Dell had a version with a wire cage around the display, and then the display would flip around in the
Yeah. I
cage.
remember that.
So like we had all the companies were experimenting with the 2-in-1 thing, and eventually they figured out hinges and how to have a 360 hinge, and that stuck. Although, again, tons of variations.
Yeah.
Lenovo had the watch band hinge, and now we're on a dual hinge now that everybody's kind of been using. And then, of course, Microsoft started with the Surface Pro as a tablet with a keyboard. Now is its whole spiel, and now they got away from the whole tablet thing. But that design has been kind of iconic, and it's stuck around. So this stuff takes time. And then, like, HP came out with the Spectre Folio in 2018, which was a radically different device design that kind of combined a bunch of these elements. So the same thing is going to happen with dual screen and single screen is it's going to take a while to figure this stuff out. And that's why it's
Hmm.
okay to be critical of them, but someone will eventually figure out kind of what works here and how to leverage this
Yeah.
technology.
So, real quick, regarding the 10x stuff, the other benefits that 10x would have brought to the table, including like faster Windows updates, a locked down OS, which was state separated, and obviously containerized Win32. I don't think all of that can come to desktop, but some of it certainly can. Like containerizing apps, I think they could bring to desktop. Not sure about the state separation or the lockdown OS. I think it would be a mistake to try and force that onto Windows existing Windows 10 users. And faster Windows updates, I believe, is tied to state separation. So it can't be done for existing Windows 10 PCs. Although in the future they could start shipping new Windows 10 PCs that are already state separated, and maybe they could get around it that way. But the fact of the matter is Microsoft is prioritizing the legacy version of Windows again, which means all of the Win32 stuff is all still there in the core of the operating system, still quite it's not as performant on low end hardware as Windows Core would have been. And it is a shame, but we could see this slowly improve over time. I think Microsoft's goal is to sort of make desktop Windows Legacy a hybrid Core OS sort of thing. It won't be true Core OS, it never will be, but they can try their best to modernize it in every way they can, and they're starting from the top down. So they're doing the UX and the UI and the feature set. Then I'm sure in the future we'll see them improve sort of the under the hood stuff to make it a little bit more like Windows 10X was. But yeah, it is a shame, and it's honestly it's probably quite embarrassing for Microsoft because they announced this thing. This isn't like this isn't like Andromeda, which was like we knew all about it, but they never announced it. So all the stuff they did with Andromeda, where they scrapped it and brought it back to life with Android, doesn't actually matter because they never announced it on stage. They announced Surface Neo and Windows 10X on stage. It's an official part of their narrative. So for them to sort of come out and admit, which they haven't done, by the way. Again, this is all reporting. Microsoft hasn't actually said it's dead. But for Microsoft to eventually, I guess they will have to say something at some point, come out and say, yeah, 10x isn't happening. Oops. It's bad. It's bad PR. It looks bad. It looks unprofessional. It's like they don't know what they're doing. And it's embarrassing for them. And I sort of, and if you remember, Panos Panay was very, very, he didn't want to talk about Surface Neo or Duo or Windows 10X at that event in October 2019. He wanted to just, he said on stage, he's very nervous. They don't normally do this. He wasn't sure how to go about doing this. And that has come back to bite them on the backside, really, in regards to 10X and the Neo, at least. The Duo seems to be doing okay. But the other two, not so much. And we probably now won't see Windows 10X as was announced. And the Surface Neo, if that does have a ship, who knows what that's going to be like. But yeah, it's sad because this is Windows Core, right? We've been talking about Windows Core forever. We've been hoping and waiting for Microsoft to finally ship a version of it for the mainstream market. And every time they get close, they just fall down at the last hurdle. They did it with Andromeda. They've done it with Windows 10X now. I'm sure they're going to try again in the future, and I'm sure they'll fail a third time. It's just really sad. And it's all Win32's fault because they can't get go with Win32. So they can't do these modern versions of Windows because it just doesn't make sense for them.
Yeah, and we should remember that October event was very weird in that sense that they showed off Duo and Neo.
Yeah, it was.
Because they've never pre-announced devices.
And this is why they don't pre-announce devices.
Right. And they couldn't just show Neo.
Without an OS, yeah.
Yeah, because that was kind of the whole point of it.
Well, Lenovo did. They were like, here's a foldable that runs a no OS we're not talking about yet.
But they showed full Windows on
I know, and I'm saying Microsoft could have probably done that, but they didn't. They decided to go all out, and that has, as I said, bit them in the backside.
Yeah, they should. It's a shame because it was kind of cool that they pre-announced something. We had something to look forward to.
Right. Yeah, you know what this means? It means they'll never do this again, and it's really sad.
They'll never do it again, right? Yeah. Of course. Like, it's a big thing to walk back two things. There's the operating system and now potentially Neo. I still think Neo will live on. I do think it's going to come back.
Me too.
Like I said, this is primarily driven by Intel and its desire to kind of reinvigorate and keep the market going forward. I did that article that went up last week about why AMD struggles. It's because in the laptop market, it's because Intel spends so much money on its own R&D creating new devices, which then it, lends or actually licenses to partners who then go and build it and mass produce it. And, I don't think they're going to throw away, all these companies are going to throw away research into dual screen or foldables at all. And I think same thing goes with Neo. I mean, the hardware for Neo seemed to be mostly complete. There's the issues of mass production and what it would cost and all that needs to be figured out. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if they revisit it. It's going to be interesting to hear Microsoft.
The problem Microsoft has is if they don't ship the Neo now, basically, or this year, and even then, actually, I think maybe this year's too late because when they announced the Neo, they announced the Duo and the Neo together as sort of like a family of devices. They look the same. The only difference really between them is the OS and the size of them. We believe with Duo 2, they're going to the hardware will look a bit different. It's not going to look like this. It'll be a bit more updated, a little bit nicer. But if they do that, then they also have to update the Neo. Otherwise, if they were to launch the Neo at some point and it looked just like a bigger version of Duo 1, yet with Duo 2 or maybe even Duo 3, they have this much sleeker, much more sort of futuristic design, it's going to look really weird. It's going to be, that's the first Neo. That's the first Duo, just bigger. That's ugly. So, Microsoft is like I said, they're in a really rough position regarding the Neo and 10X and all of these delays. It's all Windows Core OS's fault. They keep trying this thing and it just keeps failing. Just do Windows 10. It works. You come on, just do it. Get it over with. Let's move on.
The issue with Windows 10, of course, is it was built for a desktop world.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's very static and sort of legacy. I realize why they had to do 10X, but if they're with the Sun Valley stuff, if they are bringing a lot of 10X over to desktop, then I think that issue goes away for the most part. Because if they can modernize the Windows desktop UX, then there's no problem for the Neo. Because the biggest issue for the Neo at this point would be the fact that Windows 10 doesn't have different modes for the different postures that the Neo has, right? And it also doesn't really have the dual screen snapping yet, though they could very easily port that stuff from Windows 10X to Windows 10, which I think they probably will do. So yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens. At least the processor world seems to be catching up, and I'm running full Windows on some pretty amazing hardware these days.
You can run full Windows on a Snapdragon 810 processor.
810?
Yeah, or the Lumia 950 XL. People have got full Windows 10 running on the Lumia 950 XL.
Yeah, I mean, the hardware is allowing us to do much more, right? I mean, we were talking about Intel Evo last week, and now you hit 9-10 hours easy in a laptop. And so we're getting to the point where it's been mostly fine. Apple is very good, of course, doing the processor, but also juggling basically 3 operating systems. I mean, technically more if you count watchOS, but you have watchOS, you have iPad OS, iPhone OS, and then of course Mac OS. And like they're able to kind of create these new split off operating systems and just do fine. Microsoft though seems to have a lot of issues.
Every time they try, it's just met with embarrassment.
But to give a little credit to Microsoft, it's not like Google is killing it either. Like Chrome OS, despite it's doing well in schools and making an impact in certain markets, really hasn't. It's Chrome OS is 10 years old now.
Yeah,
it's weird to think about it. 10 years old. It really hasn't. I feel like we're always talking about like the wave is coming, and it's like we're still waiting for the wave to come. It is growing. They've had massive success last year due to the pandemic, but it still hasn't even touched premium PC land, right? And there's all this talk about Fuchsia, and there are other grand plans of merging Android and Chrome OS, and that's another like, where's that, right? We've never heard anything. And Google also can't do apparently AR as much anymore. So they have their own issues, which goes to show you it's actually very tough to kind of do this stuff.
This raises the question as well. So what does Microsoft do now in regards to the education market? Because the 10X stuff was supposed to compete against Chromebooks, and now that isn't happening. Are they just sort of giving up on that market, or just are they not deeming it important right now, or do you think they'll try and refocus 10S? Because 10S is the thing that exists, right? And it exists 10S today.
And we said that was like a Band-Aid.
Right.
That was to bridge them between Windows 10 and what Windows 10X was going to be by offering stricter control to IT and everything. I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know. I know people work in IT for schools, and they go off about how awesome Chrome OS is for device management. They said super simple. You have a problem, hit a reset, and the device just reconfigures itself. It's back online in a few minutes, and it's done. Apple, or people love Apple devices in schools. IT departments hate them. They're harder to manage and super expensive to fix. They break way easier because if you ever held an iPad, unless you put it into those bulletproof giant cases, they're very prone to breaking, and they're expensive, of course. So, I don't know. There's a ton of questions that.
Yeah, and if Microsoft just communicated with us, we'd know the answers. But because they drop these announcements and then never talk about them again, it's like, and then we just have to make our own minds up about whether or not they're dead. Like, we're still waiting for the Service Hub 2X. Microsoft, I think's last official word on the 2X was that, it will arrive eventually. Which isn't going to happen. We know it's dead. It's not coming ever. But Microsoft will never sort of be like, oh, no, we killed that. It's not happening. Because it looks bad, right? So I think they will never tell us 10X is dead. We'll just have to make our own assumptions. And when 5 years rolls around and they do a new version of Windows 10X, or call it something else at that point, I assume, they'll be like, oh, you see, we finally launched that thing we were talking about 5 years ago. But no, Microsoft, this is a new thing. Don't even try that with us. But yeah, I think that's everything regarding 10X.
On the other hand, they feel very bullish about Windows 10. So
yeah, I mean, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but they are planning a huge marketing push for Windows 10 this fall. The new Windows, Sun Valley. This is a big year for Windows 10, and honestly, once they announce Sun Valley, I think a lot of people will see that and sort of understand their decision to put 10X on the shelf. Because they'll see all these new big changes coming to Windows 10 desktop and go, oh, I'm excited for that. That makes way more sense than what they were trying with 10X.
Right, because they still have this legacy issue with Windows,
Yeah.
that when they create a different version that has limitations,
This
how do you market and
Yeah,
explain that?
exactly. Yeah, this way with Sun Valley, there are no limitations. It's still legacy Windows, but all that legacy stuff is just better hidden. It's harder to find now, and it's like they've tried to pretty it up where they can. But all of that legacy stuff is still there for those who see it as a benefit, and for those who don't see it as a benefit, it's now sort of hidden away. It's not a major concern to the. It's not a thorn in the Windows UX anymore.
Actually, I know my own answer to this question about education and what did they do between Windows 10s and Windows 10X. And the answer is we already know. It's going to be cloud PC.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I didn't even think of that. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Because I think it's safe to say that cloud PC design and initiative, which we know is probably going live this summer in enterprise, and according to Mary Jo Foley, seems to be already in testing with certain
Yeah. That's right.
companies, which is safe to say, you know, that will eventually roll out to education markets. How that works, we don't know really, right?
Yeah.
Is it like completely streaming? But it's going to be just like a Chromebook is pretty much dependent upon having a Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah,
Uh,
but not only that, it will also be depending on a platform. Like they could, like it will still need to be running Windows or Chrome OS or some kind, just so you can run the Cloud PC software that streams the
right.
apps. So
That's what I'm wondering how
yeah,
that
because
works.
10x would have actually suited that really well, because it's such a lightweight OS. Like it doesn't need, it's like you don't have to worry about it. And then if you just have this Cloud PC service built on top, that wouldn't have been so bad. And maybe they will do that. Like I said, who knows? They can recycle a lot of this Windows core stuff, but I think it will just be Windows 10s and then Cloud PC integrates into 10s.
Yeah, possibly. I'm thinking, well, because the benefit of cloud PC is this idea of thin clients, this idea of like
Yes.
really thin laptops that don't need a ton of storage, they don't need a ton of RAM. Uh, they were basically a screen, a keyboard, and battery
Yeah.
with a couple ports, and Wi-Fi and increasingly LTE. Right? I had some conversations with Qualcomm, and they made the point there. There's a study that they did in a real life example. I think it was in San Diego during the pandemic in schools, and the schools were providing kids with like I forget what kind of device it was. It might have been a Chromebook or something like that. But they would also provide a Wi-Fi puck. This, the to give connection basically. And what they found out, of course, is the obvious. One, it's expensive to provide those little pucks with. I think it would be like the pucks would get the LTE service and then act as a Wi-Fi hotspot kind of thing. Um, but they were expensive to purchase and distribute, and of course, people lost them.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you ever, when people tell me just carry like, though I used to have a Wi-Fi hotspot, like it's another thing to charge, it's another thing to lose. Uh, they're not completely ideal because you still have this modem thing that's external to the device, so the bandwidth is not as good as being native to the device. And this is where having LTE built into a device, the schools found out was much easier because you could just turn on. And I was also told that this is kind of cool. This idea of like, this doesn't apply to consumers, but the issue a lot of consumers are thinking about is like, oh, I don't have to put a SIM in and have a separate plan. And, how do I manage this? And I have to have a monthly contract. But what I'm finding out now is the carriers are setting up plans with companies where you get like, say, 20 gigabytes of data a month, and you can distribute that data amongst multiple devices. So the devices, it's not like your one device is limited to 2 gigabytes. It's just the company, the people who have these fleet of devices all share the same data plan, all share this pool of
Yeah.
data, and that's that. And if you think about for schools and IT management, that's a way cooler thing to be able to do because you can actually monitor who's using a lot of data, who should get the amount of data. They can increase if they need it. Like that is where this stuff is going. So you throw in ubiquity of LTE, increasingly more 5G, pricing eventually coming down, and this idea of like a pooled data plan versus giving everybody a little Wi-Fi puck that costs X amount of money per user. Um, I do think that this is probably where we're going. And we should point out that the Qualcomm 7C devices, which are just starting to hit now in the education markets, are around $300 to $400. In fact, Samsung was supposed to announce a 7C device, the Galaxy Go, I think it was called, um, which is supposed to be, I think, around $400. And
Nice.
so, yeah, so they really are trying to push that number down. And there is a lot more interest in LTE. So, uh, yeah, I mean, I think because and if you look at what Satya Nadella's talked about Azure and cloud computing, it's been accelerated, right, due to the pandemic and everything like that. We've seen it, and now we've seen it with game streaming, right? It's already here, right? So it's game streaming that's growing. We know about this enterprise move will be tied to Microsoft 365. So I could definitely see them bringing this to education within the next year. We'll start to see these really kind of thin devices. So, let's stick a pin in that. We see what happens with that. Oh, that was a surprisingly long 40-minute discussion about Windows 10X. And
Now, hopefully, we
yeah,
never have to talk about it again.
right. Speaking of chips, just quickly, Intel was in the news this week. So if you haven't watched the 60 Minutes interview with Gelsinger, I believe that's his name, for the new CEO of Intel, who's a really interesting guy, mostly because he's not a numbers guy. He's an engineer guy. And he's really taking the reins of Intel and making big changes. And I think it's the changes a lot of people have been asking for and agree with. But he was interviewed with 60 Minutes because there's this idea here that there's a chip shortage going globally right now, and it's affecting every industry, whether it's IoT, edge computing, cars. Cars increasingly use so many new chips. Of course, laptop demand, smartphones, refrigerators, you name it. Everything relies, avionics, of course, rely on processors and chips. And there's a shortage due to that demand. Also, the pandemic screwed up supply chain. And now increasingly countries, not just the US and China, but a lot of countries are reevaluating their supply chains because turns out, despite the benefits of globalization, no one likes really being dependent upon another country for its infrastructure and its businesses. Now, this works both ways. In the US here, we're paranoid about China, Huawei, other companies putting their chips into our infrastructure. So there was allegations made, and Huawei does have kind of close ties with the Chinese government, despite the fact that they make amazing hardware. But works both ways. China itself, I think Americans like to think it's like, oh, we can ban China and imports and ban Huawei because we don't trust them because obviously they're not a purely good government. But China thinks the same way. Like, it's not like China's cool that like, oh, Intel and AMD and Windows and everything that's powered on computers and, Android OS is all in the United States. Like, they don't like that either. They have the same paranoia. So now China is bringing and making it, oops, sorry, hit my microphone there, is making it a lot of its own businesses to mirror Intel, AMD, and the RAM manufacturers and NAND, memory, everything. And they're creating their own operating system. So you're seeing this like kind of division. But on 60 Minutes, they're talking about how, Intel wants to build a new fab in the United States. The issue, of course, is chips are designed by very smart people in the United States, but we don't have the capability to make those chips, which is hilariously weird. It's why, though, like Apple designs its own chips, but it doesn't make its own chips. It goes to a company called TSMC, based in, I believe they're in Hong Kong. Yeah, they are, and they actually manufacture because it's really hard to manufacture chips. And it's a problem though because our schools now teach people how to design, but they don't teach people how to build, and so you're seeing this kind of discrepancy. So Intel is out there petitioning the government, the U.S. government, to bring back factories to the United States. This is going to be taking years, of course. It's not like you can just build a factory overnight, but it's an interesting discussion about how important silicon is going. There's also international politics. So TSMC is based in Hong Kong, and there's this issue with China. They want, or is it Taiwan? I always forget. Sorry. I think it's Taiwan. And, China wants to take over Taiwan. And if they were to do that, it would completely disrupt the supply chain again, because now it would be under Chinese control. And, what happens to our entire infrastructure, right? If you need like if Intel needs to make chips now or AMD needs to make chips and, it's under Chinese control, how do you trust those chips, right, in the supply chain and what happens? Maybe China goes, you know what, we're not going to sell you these chips anymore. Now what? You just kneecapped the United States, right? So there's a lot of it's a very complicated topic. We have a few articles posted up on Windows Central covering this. And so I encourage people to go read it because it's going to be interesting to see how countries pivot. The good news is it's sort of like mutually assured destruction, what was called the MAD policy back in the Cold War, where no country really wants to start this, right? Because if China were to do that, for instance, and block the United States, they're also dependent upon U.S. technology for a lot of its stuff, including operating systems and more. And because the economies are so interconnected now, you can't really just destroy the United States economy and have the rest of the world carry on, right? It doesn't work like that anymore. Likewise, we can't really destroy the Chinese economy and have the world carry on because so much of our manufacturing is done there, whether it's your clothes, it's chips, it's cars, like what have you. So it's going to be interesting to navigate. I think it'll work out. I think companies will eventually land in their own countries and build up infrastructure that way. But this is going to be an interesting topic, and then Intel was, for those who hate on Intel for having issues making its chips at the lower nanometer, they were upfront about that, what needs to be done. And again, that's going to be sort of an ongoing process with Intel as they have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to AMD, Qualcomm, and Apple. They're pushing, those companies are definitely at 7, definitely at 5 nanometer. And now IBM this week just had a breakthrough. They're at 2 nanometer, which is insane. Now, to put that in perspective, IBM doesn't make chips either. They're able to create a 2 nanometer chip, but they need another company they're not bringing it to market. It'll be years. The first, was it 5 or 7 nanometer was announced in 2015, and it took AMD like 4 years before they were able to actually make it in mass production. And that goes back to Qualcomm too. Qualcomm bought, I forgot the name of the company, Nuvia, I think it was. It was this other company that designed chips, and they had one of the people that served on the company was an Apple engineer who designed the Apple chip, and Qualcomm bought them. So now Qualcomm is expected to really be building some really serious custom processors that aren't relying on the ARM architecture completely. But that happened in January. We're still probably 2 years out before you see the fruits of that. The stuff takes a long time to happen. But you're going to see, I think, a lot of movement. Google is rumored now to be designing its own processor for the upcoming Pixel. Samsung already designs its own processors, the Exynos props. I think that's what they're called. So everybody's going down this route. Microsoft was rumored to be designing its own ARM processor. Everybody's going down this route of doing custom design, so it's not just Apple. But you won't see this stuff for a couple more years, which is why I said this is going to be definitely an ongoing project. So go check out those articles. It's kind of fascinating stuff. Unless you're Zach, you don't care.
Yeah, you're right. No,
you can't have Windows 10 without chips, Zach.
It's true. It's very true. So I do care. I care deeply, but only about the Snapdragon ones.
Yeah. Well, it's all kind of cool stuff. I'm impressed with the Intel and AMD stuff. It is actually really good.
Yeah.
Anywho, let's cover some general news here. iOS Edge. So a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned about how Android has a new beta dev and canary releases for Edge. And you can just go and sign up for those in the Play Store. This is part of the effort to unify the code base for Edge across desktop iOS and Android. And now the other shoe has fallen. Now it's on iOS. Now iOS, being Apple, always has a much more strict system for beta testing. So this is Edge beta, which means it matches it's Edge version 91, which is like the old version was Edge 42 or 47, I think it was.
Yeah.
So it's been a big jump in version numbers. But iOS goes through a system called test flight, and they can only allow 10,000 people testing per time, which is really dumb. So if you're lucky, we have the article up on Windows Central, and in there you have a link. You can click it, and if you're on your iOS device, you can enroll in the beta. And once in, you'll get the updated Edge. And being iOS, you can only install one version of Edge at a time. So Android, you can literally, just like PC, you can have Edge Canary, you can have Edge
Yeah.
Dev, and you can have the store Edge. Like you can have all of them. Um, but on iOS, you'll have to live in one channel. I do suspect there'll be other channels coming to iOS too, but it's a big change. Like the UI is different. It's still Edge, of course, but it's just the icons are different. The layout's a little bit changed. The scrolling and animation is all different and better. Uh, so it's a really nice step forward as this brings into alignment. You also do get more flags. If we talked about that before, if you're into flags on your browser, you can enable some other features that are experimental. So it's cool stuff, but eventually this will trickle up. If you don't want to go into the test flight, this will trickle up to the production, the in-store version for everybody at some point. We don't have the ETA on that, but that is kind of cool. Should also mention Samsung Smart Things is now on the Windows 10 store. People forget, but Smart Things was on Windows Phone back in 2014. I actually did a video about it in 2014, which just makes me feel super old. It wasn't a very good app back in 2014. It was kind of like this web hybrid app, but whatever, it worked. But this is the real deal now. This is a real full UWP app. This is sparked simply because, as I mentioned before, Samsung has gotten way more serious about Windows 10, that is creating devices with the Galaxy Book Pro and Galaxy Book Pro 360. And so those have Smart Things built into it, as well as some of the other Samsung apps. Samsung has a huge amount of apps on Windows 10. When you get this thing, it's like a list. It's like 10 different apps. And a lot of people will be like, bloatware. But I'm telling you, it's no. Samsung creates really, really, really nice apps for its devices.
Yeah.
For instance, they have a... Yeah, go on.
It's the same thing that they do in Android, except on Android they have more control over how that appears to the end user. Most of that's hidden because they're all services and whatnot. But on Windows 10, OEMs don't have that luxury. It has to look like Windows 10, and you just install your apps to the start menu.
Yeah, I mean, case in point, the S Pen menu. If you have a Samsung Note, you have the little, where you tap the screen, you get the radial menu pop up on your Samsung device with pen options and different. They have the exact same thing on Windows 10. It does the same thing with the pen. It's crazy.
Exactly.
They also have a thing. They have an app called Live Wallpaper, and there's different versions. Just so you can do a static wallpaper, and it basically cycles through a pre-made list of wallpaper, and you can actually then go through that list and unchoose things if you don't like it. And they're like based around concepts and themes, minimalism or colors and all this kind of stuff. But they actually have one called Live Wallpaper, and it's like a static image, but it changes dynamically based on the time and weather. So if it's daytime and sunny out, like you'll have a desert photo, it'll be brightly lit, there'll be a sun in the sky. But the nighttime comes around, it changes to a night scene. Right. You'll see stars, and maybe even a moon will pop up.
That was funny enough, a Windows 10X feature, which is probably never going to come now. But also macOS does that as well, so it's not like a new thing. But it's cool that Samsung did that themselves, because when Microsoft can't do that themselves.
Yeah, so then you got Smart Things, and then you have a nearby share app. They even did Samsung TV, which is something people don't talk about. But Samsung has an app called Samsung TV on its phones, and when you click it, it's like a Hulu, but it's like free stuff on the web, but it's all presented like in a channel form. Like there's a Riff Tracks. If you don't know, Riff Tracks is a Mystery Science Theater. It's the team from that. There's a Riff Tracks channel, and it just shows Riff Tracks. And I was like, holy cow! So they created that for Windows 10. So it's so much feature parity between its phones and its laptops. That I can honestly say is, but I'm seeing a lot of OEMs do this. They're all kind of creating really kind of cool apps. And of course, they have your phone. So, but the Smart Things is neat because it's available to any Windows 10 device. It's optimized for the Samsung laptops. That goes back to the Intel stuff. They've tricked out the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to basically work better with its own apps and services, because that's what Intel does. And so, but if you just have a regular laptop, you can of course install it and still run it, and it'll run fine, right? It's no issue. But Yeah, that's kind of cool stuff. Let's pivot a little bit towards the Epic versus Apple story. I actually not into this as much as other people
Me
have
neither.
been.
I tried to tune into one of the calls, I think yesterday or the day before, and the participants on the call sound so muffled, and so it's so hard to understand what they're saying because the audio quality is so low. Because it's a phone call, it's not like a video stream or anything like that. It's literally you're tapping into a phone call, which is using it's telephone lines. It's ancient. So everyone sounds terrible. I listened to 2 minutes and I just said, nah, it's fine. I'm not gonna do that.
And I was in 10 different meetings, so I was like, I don't have time for this. So luckily, Robert Carnival did a roundup. I asked him to, like, dude, I haven't been following this stuff. Can you just do a roundup? So it was basically for me. This is how actually Windows Central kind of works. There's a lot of the changes you see on the site and things that happen just because I want them because I'm busy or something. So we have this great roundup, and I was like, just focus on the. So if you don't know, Epic and Apple, they're being was it Epic suing Apple because of its store policies
Yes.
and about Fortnite and revenue sharing and all this kind of stuff. And whatever side you take, I mean, most of our audience is probably going to be against Apple for probably the correct reasons, but it doesn't matter. What's really interesting is the discovery process, and as witnesses, they have to produce evidence, and what's being produced and coming out, of course, is a lot of internal emails between companies talking about data and all this kind of information. And Microsoft is cited as a witness between the two because Microsoft has a store. Microsoft was part of this. Remember, they tried to get their xCloud system onto iOS, and Apple was like, no, because each game had to be independently reviewed,
Right.
and because of the rating system. And so they're like, no, you can have like 5 games all independently reviewed, but you can't have an entire library of streaming stuff because it violates our policies. And it was a weird position to take because things like Netflix and Hulu exist, and Netflix have tons of movies on it, and it's not like Apple reviews every single movie on Netflix. So there's some weird arguments here. But what we learned was, and did you go through this? Did you see this list, by the way, Zach?
The article that
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, I'm really looking through it right now. It is really interesting. So some of this I think we already knew. So for example, Microsoft doesn't make money on Xbox consoles. I feel like we've always known that, but it's now sort of definitive.
It's been speculated because the original Xbox, there's a famous story about how they lost a ton of money on
Right.
it, the hardware, even more so because of the Red Ring of Death kind of thing,
Hmm.
but that they were selling them at a loss purposely. What was not clear was with further iterations of Xbox, did that hold true? Because the price definitely went up
Yeah.
on them. And so we didn't know if the price went up, if they were slowly putting in margins in there. Uh, even if it's 2%, 5%.
Right.
Like maybe
Yeah.
they were actually making a little bit of money off of it, but it turns out no, they actually do lose money even still today on the console themselves. Not, as you say, not surprised because the deal here is they take a cut of game sales
Right.
and now increasingly services that power the device.
Mm.
And so that's where the money's to be made, which is why Game Pass is so massive.
Yeah, and on that subject, some documents that were revealed suggested that Microsoft was considering cutting game revenue sales on Xbox to just a 12% cut as well, which is what they announced on PC last week, I think it was. So if you're a game developer selling games through the Microsoft Store on PC, Microsoft will only take a 12% cut from you now, but on Xbox it's still 30%. And this document was like, oh yeah, the Microsoft definitely considered it. They looked at the numbers and stuff, but ultimately decided against it. And so that won't be happening on Xbox, likely because, as you mentioned, that's how Microsoft makes its money back, by taking a significantly larger cut from game sales because they lost money on the hardware. Although I assume over time that the cost of components does come down, and I guess maybe Microsoft eventually starts making money on hardware. But Microsoft seems to suggest that they don't make money on hardware at all. Which ones are the more interesting ones here?
So Shadow is really kind of interesting. Shadow is a company that makes effectively what Microsoft is trying to do with Cloud PC. They basically allow you to stream Windows 10 to a different device. And so they have a version for iOS, and you can do it on a PC. You can do it on a Surface Pro X. You can basically run like a server to your Pro X. I think
Yeah,
that's how it
right. Yeah.
kind
It's funny.
and
I briefly considered Shadow when I had the Book 3 and tried to use that as my main PC. Someone recommended Shadow, and I could have used that to host the podcast every Friday. But they're super limited preview. So like it was like 3 months waitlist. So I was like, nah, no
I
thanks.
think it's just out now. You can just go try it. I think it's like $12 a month. It's not cheap, but you can basically do whatever you want. Like you can turn Pro X into like your, you
Yeah.
know, 32 core server with 120 gigs
Got
of
to pay
RAM if you
for it,
want.
but you can do that. Yes.
Right. So they're on iOS though, and because of Microsoft talking about this cloud gaming stuff, apparently um, offers a similar though not identical service. Microsoft was like, "Well, they're on your App Store." Apple then temporarily removed Shadow from the
Jeez.
store,
Thanks,
while still not
Microsoft.
getting much. Yeah, so it seems like there's been a lot of that between these emails. Of course, Epic was, the head of Epic there, Tim Sweeney, who's yeah, he's a personality. Let's just say
Yeah,
that.
he's been very vocal about UWP and Microsoft's attempts at trying to lock Windows down, all of which have failed. So maybe he was right.
Yeah, it's just the way he goes about things has been kind of
Yeah.
aggressive. Like he even basically told Microsoft, like, "Hey, we're going to screw around with Apple. Watch what happens." And I'm kind of paraphrasing, but kind of not. Like that's
Yeah.
exactly what he mailed. So they do have these pretty honest conversations behind the scenes, as you would expect. These all are human beings after all.
Hmm.
But
This one,
yeah, it's cool,
this
Epic.
this one
Yeah,
here,
go
I
ahead.
think is quite interesting. Epic pays Sony for cross play, but not Microsoft. Which is probably a big punch in the face for Microsoft. So, as seen in old emails shared between Sony and Epic Games, the Japanese tech company knew very well that it had the upper hand in all negotiations with Epic about Fortnite crossplay, thanks to the PS4 absolutely dominating the Xbox One. So basically, Sony was saying to Epic Games, no, we don't really want crossplay. It doesn't benefit us to enable crossplay. And I believe that was in the news at the time that Sony was saying was the reason why crossplay wasn't a thing on Fortnite. But then it eventually happened, and that was the end of it. But now it's been revealed that the reason that happened is because Sony said to Epic Games, fine, we'll allow you to do crossplay, but you've got to pay us an additional amount of money and for however long. And that's what Epic agreed to do. Meanwhile, Microsoft and all the other platforms aren't getting any additional money at all for enabling crossplay. So I'm sure Microsoft are a bit annoyed at that revelation.
Just Satya slapping Phil.
So how
They
did you
make
let this happen?
back in the head. Like, how? Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you're right. So I mean, Sony was the one that had the upper hand here. They
Yeah.
were the holding out. So that's what they did.
Yeah. This one's interesting as well. Epic Games called Microsoft well poisoners, well being like a water well. In the same email chain where Lego Universe's derailment at the hands of the phallic imagery was brought up, and Epic's online gameplay systems lead David Nichols said the AI singularity will probably be some of ML. What's ML again? I can't remember. My mind's gone blank. Is that machine learning? Machine learning dictator. There was also a bit of Microsoft mudslinging in reference to Microsoft's augmented reality marketing efforts. Epic Games VP Mark Rain said, yeah, horribly overselling AR in a way that poisons the well for the industry. They did the same S word with HoloLens. So Epic Games clearly not too pleased with Microsoft's AR efforts for some reason. And mixed reality, I think they're referring to the VR headsets as well. I can sort of see where they're coming from with that. That was a sort of weird thing that Microsoft did with Windows. It's still there today, and it's kind of cool. But they were essentially trying to launch their own VR platform on Windows, and it didn't take off. And that's what I assume Epic Games weren't too pleased about. But yeah, anything else interesting here?
No, it's an interesting article. Go through it. We have a summary of basically each of the points, and then links to the deeper versions of each article. So if you're into the gossip stuff, but yeah, it's the industry is both awesome and terrible at the same time. Everybody's a terrible human being at some level, but we'll see what happens and comes of this Epic versus Apple. It does have large ranging impact though, because of how stores are run, revenue sharing, and all this kind of stuff.
I just
It's tough stuff.
I do.
Yeah.
I do want to read this one because of just the way Robert's written. It's kind of funny. Epic Games foreshadowed its Apple lawsuit by asking Phil Spencer to nix the Xbox Gold paywall to Fortnite.
Yes.
In a series of emails between Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney and head of Xbox Phil Spencer, the former hinted that Epic Games would be doing something crazy in August, aka a giant lawsuit against the company responsible for iPhones, and that it behoove Xbox to make Fortnite truly free around the time to make them look extra good in the public eye. Phil got back to him with an "I'm busy right now, Tim" email.
So I tried to I didn't see where that quote was. I meant to ask Robert, but where that came from, because if you go back to the source emails, I didn't see that part, but maybe I'm missing it.
No,
So.
I think he's paraphrasing. I believe I read the email. It's more like, yeah, we've got a lot on our plate right now. Like, I definitely want to arrange a conversation with you, but I can't do that right now. Because they eventually did do that, right? Xbox Live Gold is now free if you're playing a free-to-play game, which Fortnite is. So Microsoft did eventually follow up with Tim, I guess, and be like, oh yeah, sure, we'll do that. But it wasn't at the time in which Tim Sweeney was emailing Phil. I saw another one. This is sort of less related to Microsoft, but there was another email I read where it was between Tim Cook and Phil Schiller, where Tim Sweeney had emailed one or the other of the two, and Tim Cook replied, "Is this the guy? Like, who is this guy? We don't know who this guy is." Tim Sweeney, like, well, you will know who he is eventually.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how sort of out of touch some people can be in this industry. You think, like, don't you know this guy? He's like,
Yeah,
no.
but I'm not really surprised Tim Cook. I feel like Tim Cook doesn't actually pay attention to the rest of the tech industry. He pays people to do that, and he just focuses on making money for Apple because that's his job, really.
And bringing purple phones to market, like it's a big deal.
It's purple now. We are the best. Buy our phone.
I'm just loving how like they did that. It was sort of like, I'm just thinking like, so when they made iPhone 12, someone was like, should we do purple? And you're like, no, you stupid. No, we're not doing a purple phone. Like they didn't have the insight apparently to do it back then, but now all of a sudden
it's
dawned on
probably
them. Of course,
it's probably an attempt to just boost sales mid-year, right? Midway through.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's all it is. They're like, oh no, purple will be cool. Save it for later. For no reason.
Yeah.
So now looking at my blue phone, like, oh, blue's stupid. Oh, well. I guess to show you how the market is kind of, it's just like diamonds, right? Diamonds aren't really that valuable. Anywho, let's talk quickly about Edge on Xbox. So Edge, as we mentioned earlier, is being unified, and that includes Xbox. So at least on preview channels, there is a new version of Edge, which is powered by Chromium. So it's the same version as desktop and increasingly Android and iOS. And it's a much more powerful browser, including one of the things it can do now is it has keyboard and mouse support. You're thinking, well, where do I get a keyboard and mouse? Razer makes a really, I mean, you can do any other one, of course, but Razer makes a really, really good one, literally built for this purpose called a Turret. I actually have two of them. I don't use them. Don't ask me to send you. I can't mail things. It's impossible. But the Turret is a awesome, really nice Razer keyboard that's wireless. And it has a slide-out tray where it has a wireless mouse. So you can literally sit there on your couch and just... And the idea behind this was we were seeing more video games on Xbox get mouse and keyboard support. And if you're a hardcore gamer, you shun the controller. You're a WASD user. And so that's what this was built for. But now with Edge, this new version of Edge, you can use a keyboard and mouse too, which makes Edge way more interesting on Xbox, because if you ever used Edge on Xbox, it's a little clunky using a controller to navigate that mouse cursor slowly across the screen and try to land it on a specific button. And then you have to bring up a keyboard that you have to type with, the buttons, right? It's just not ideal. So this solves that problem, which then opens up all sorts of possibilities, because this is basically now a real browser and you have a real keyboard and a mouse. So what can you do on it? Jez Corden, our games editor, basically said, let me fire up Office. Since that's on the web, can I do it? And he could. So he was able to actually bring up Word, and he wrote the article, I believe, that we see on this topic in Word on his Xbox. And we've always had these kind of concept devices like stick PCs, right? That was a thing for a while. Lenovo made them. It's a little USB stick, put it behind your TV, ran full Windows. Actually still have a couple laying around. They were kind of slow, but it was still kind of cool. And so this question is like, well, with the browser, and we've talked a lot about in this podcast, how Edge is effectively a secondary platform for Windows these days. should Microsoft kind of invest in doing more of this stuff on Windows? I think the answer is probably no. And Jez rightly points out that they're kind of spread thin already and trying to improve Xbox and bring new features. But there's a lot of cool stuff you can do here. I still think it'd be a very small percentage of users who would want to bust out a keyboard and mouse in the living room to use this. I will say, though, using the turret makes it way easier and way more kind of fun to do if you've never tried it. So it's at least an option out there. You could also do crazy things. I think you could probably run Shadow PC through your
Yeah,
browser.
I mean you can. It's a browser. If you can do it on desktop, you can do it on the Xbox. The only thing you can't really do through the Xbox One is install PWAs, which I think is a real shame. Because I'd love to just have like PWAs run full screen on the Xbox, but that's not a thing you can do. You can still bookmark them and just launch them through Edge, which is I guess fine. And I'm sure there's a full screen button as well. But you can't actually pin them to like your apps list on Xbox and stuff, which is a shame. But yeah, no, I think it's really cool. And honestly, I would love to see. Like, if you remember when we first started talking about C Shell, the idea was that you could have like Continuum for all kinds of form factors. So, for example, you could have an Xbox, you could plug a keyboard and mouse into it, and the UI would change from being sort of game-orientated dashboard to a more keyboard and mouse-friendly, maybe desktop-ish interface, where you'd have your games in like a start menu, and you'd be able to like open UWP apps and like use them like a computer. That would be really cool if the Microsoft ever actually did that. And with the Series X looking like a tower PC these days, I feel like there's more reason than ever to enable a feature like that. Now, I do realize it's a bit extra. Most gamers aren't using the Xbox in that way, but it's just cool. It would be cool to have, right? I think more than anything, it would just be like one of those extra, oh, look what we can do that the PlayStation can't do. We can be basically a PC. That would be cool.
Yeah, I do agree. It is definitely extra. I do find the idea of like, I don't know, the few times I try to run stick PCs and everything like that, it's like neat. But again, it's sort of like the X1 Fold and other experiments, even Continuum. It's really neat. It's never worked its way into my regular workflow. That may change. I want to bust out the turret. I know where it is actually, but I gotta hope that the dongle is there with it. It's like, am I going to be able to do this and charge it up and everything? But I kind of want to give it a go to see what it's like. Would I actually do this? But having a screen that far from you is a challenge sometimes in terms of interactive. It's just kind of weird. I don't know. Something I'll have to play around with. But hey, if you're on the preview rings, preview channels, whatever they're called now, you can give this a shot yourself. Let us know what you would do with a full Edge browser on your Xbox. Yeah, I don't know what I would do. I would just pick up my laptop is what I would do.
Yeah, no, same. I'm the same.
Which I guess segues nicely into our next topic, which we'll rounding up the podcast, hopefully, which is this guy here. So I'm just going to hold it up if you're watching the podcast. Actually, I don't know if this will probably blurred out because of the GeForce NVIDIA stuff I'm using for blurring my background. But this is the HP Elite Folio. And I'm very excited about this device. So 2018, I still remember this day, New York City. It was in the fall. I think it was October. HP held an event. And I remember I had to get there super early in the morning, which I do not like. But it was going to be this like lighter than air. They had this, and it was a big announcement. They showed off this thing called the Spectre Folio. Spectre is part of their consumer line. It's the premium consumer line. And they showed this device, and it was really weird and wacky. It had an external leather shell to it. It looked like a football, basically. It was the same kind of brown. It was also like the leather went on the inside, too. So where the keyboard was and where your hands would lay down was also leather. And it ran an Intel processor. It was a fanless one. It was basically what was known then as a Y series. And it was cool because not only was it a laptop, but you were able to pull the display forward and it would cover the keyboard and click in right behind the trackpad. So the idea was you can then have this thing at an angle, and with a pen, you can be drawing on it like a ledger, and you could still have access to the trackpad, which was also interesting because if you're on a flight and you're watching a movie, you would still have the trackpad controls to pause and skip and go forward instead of relying on the touchscreen. Also, if you're doing like a presentation or something like that, you'd still have the trackpad there. It was just a really neat thing. But then it stopped there. You can then bring the screen forward even more and lay it down flat, and basically it turned into a tablet. And it was a perfect angle for because it still had a slight angle to it because of the way it worked, and it was great for drawing on. Now, it had LTE built in too, so it was always connected. The pen was external, so I had a little pen loop and all that. Now, I got this device. I didn't review it. In fact, but I did do a whole article about how I was like, HP, you need to use precision drivers because the trackpad ruined this device for me. The trackpad was just not good because they were still relying back then, I think, on Elan, or maybe it was even Synaptics. But the trackpad was terrible. And I remember we were hacking on drivers, precision drivers, but it never really worked that well. And so the device just kind of sat in the side, but it was such a creative thing because the benefit here was you never had to take the device off your lap to transform it to these two other positions. You can have a laptop, the drawing mode, and then the viewing mode, and then the draw mode. And it could just stay in your lap. You'd have to flip it around. And, and that was the last we heard about the device. And I was like, oh, that's a shame. That was really kind of cool. And then lo and behold, and it actually started in the fall. They started teasing this, and I put it on Twitter. I was like, oh, they're teasing something. I'm like, this looks like a combo of a Pro X and the Spectre Folio. And then they announced at a CES. It was called the HP Elite Folio. That's important because now it's Elite. It has now moved to the commercial market. So the Elite series is part of business laptops, and that's what this is. So this is more aimed at business versus prosumers. But they did so many improvements. First of all, no longer 16 by 9, which looked really kind of dumb on the old version. It is now 3 by 2, which is the only correct aspect ratio out there. Of course, as Zach will point out, it's only a full HD display,
Disgusting.
which is, but that's because it gets really good battery life. I actually find it's a very good display.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They also followed Microsoft by putting the pen in the keyboard tray. So it is now behind the keyboard, just like on the Surface Pro X, and it sits there and it charges as well. They also put in the SIM card slot in there, which is really wacky. I literally had to bust out the directions, figure out where they put the SIM slot. I was like, where is this thing? They hit it on the last version too, but they changed it on this one. What else is there? It's quad speakers now, which is really nice. They redid the keyboard. It's super quiet. And they do now have precision touchpad drivers, which is great. The change, of course, is also it doesn't run Intel anymore. It is now a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8CX Gen 2 chip, which is this is the first device we've had with that. Now, it is technically the SQ2. So, like, what's in the Surface Pro X is the SQ2, which is based on the 8CX Gen 2. It's just Microsoft relabels it. Now, to be fair, and I haven't tested this yet, the SQ2, I do believe, has a slightly improved GPU versus this, but I haven't benchmarked it. I can tell you in benchmarking, the HP is as fast, if not a hair faster than the Pro X. But it's going to be like, this is...
Well, why do you think that is? Do you think that's just because of cooling?
Just the thermals and all this kind of stuff. I mean, but I'm telling you, like, the numbers are so close, it's within...
You wouldn't notice it.
You wouldn't notice it, right? Yeah. You would never feel it. But you kind of do for other reasons. So here's two other reasons. We talked about the screen. It's only full HD. Well, the truth is pushing fewer pixels basically kind of results in faster feeling performance.
Yeah.
If you're pushing 4K, it's why we don't see 8K laptops too. If you're pushing 4K takes a toll on the GPU. So you're actually pushing fewer pixels on here, which makes everything feels a little bit more zippy and fast. They're also using a better SSD on here. It's a very nice SSD. So it gets 3,000, I believe, or 3,100 megabytes per second for read, which is what you feel. That's what you're going to feel every day when you're using the device. That's about 1,000 megabytes per second faster than what the Pro X has. So when you combine that, they're also using very fast RAM, and it's a very fast feeling device. I'm actually very pleased with it. A full HD display is also going to give you better battery life because, again, not pushing as many pixels. And it does have 10 more milliamps of battery than the Pro X. So this should definitely get more battery life than the Pro X does by, I would say, probably 90 minutes at least. but maybe even 2 hours. Uh, it does, you don't, so you can get it with 4G LTE, but you can also get it without LTE. That's an option too, which is interesting. We haven't seen that before. And I remember Qualcomm basically said we weren't going to do non-LTE versions. But there's a non-LTE version. You can save yourself money if you're like one of these people, like, I don't need it. Save yourself. I don't know the difference. I got to look up the price. It's probably like $50. You can also get it, though, with 5G. Now, it doesn't have millimeter wave. It just has sub-6. So, because they basically said the design challenges and implementation trade-offs doing millimeter wave versus the return, we don't see it. They're 100% right. Millimeter wave is awesome. It's ridiculously fast. It's what Verizon uses. You literally need to be sitting on top of a millimeter wave tower to get the speeds, though. But still, so you can get it with 5G, which is nice. It's got a front-facing camera. It's got Windows Hello IR, just what Zach wants, of course. I'm trying to think what else. My impressions of it so far, the display is very good. It's very contrasting, just looks sharp. I know it's only full HD, but it looks really, really good. The aspect ratio is nice. The pen is a Wacom AES 2.0. So I know a lot of people are Wacom fans. So you got that here. The pen is awesome feeling. The keyboard is very good. The trackpad is great because it's precision. Has a very nice click. The audio is way better than I thought it would be. It's quad speakers. They literally have 2 speakers on the sides, like the actual sides, not the bottom sides, the sides, and then 2 on top, which is cool because whatever position you're using it in, whether you bring that screen down flat, you'll still hear the audio just fine. And if you're in the what's called the present mode or viewing mode, where it's like a triangle, you also totally hear the sound because of the way it resonates. And the battery life so far has been very, very good on it. And it does use now, instead of real leather, they're using vegan leather, basically a polyurethane, which is, HP is like every other company. They're getting on the whole sustainability track. So this comes in very light packaging, doesn't use a lot of plastics, but using real cow leather, like, isn't very sustainable, right? Murdering an animal for your computer. Some people have a problem with that. And there's a lot more vegetarians and vegans out there who would also be uncomfortable. So now it's vegan and it's all black now. So it's not brown like before. But this is the changes this is kind of like the dream device. I'm trying to think if there was one thing that was missing from it. My only kind of complaint so far is the magnet is very strong on it. So you literally have to kind of pry it open to open it up.
There's no like magical one hand open on this.
Definitely not. No, this thing is, when it's closed, it's closed. But I will say, like, in holding it, I mean, it is a solid book. It literally looks like if you went to an executive's office and they had a folio on their desk.
That's the whole point, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is like that. I mean, it is.
It looks really nice.
It's ridiculously thin. I mean, considering if you look how thin that is when it's opened, it's just like crazy. Yeah, the quality is great. Pricing's not cheap. I believe it's like $1,600 it starts at.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Maybe $1,500. But you can get up to, this one has 512 gigs of storage, 16 gigs of RAM. So it's a premium device. It competes, I would say, with my other favorite device, which is the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Titanium Yoga, which is such a crazy name. And that's actually come down in price now. You can actually pick that up for like around $1,800 too.
Yeah.
Now, it's a different device. It's the same concept. It's for people who want to lean into a tablet device with inking. Its pen, though, you have to carry separately. So you're going to probably lose it, as I have a few times. But it flips around, right, to more traditional form factor. But they're using some crazy technologies like titanium to make it super thin so that when it flips around, it's just as thin as this device. It's actually, I think, slightly thinner because the leather adds a little bit. It's also lighter, believe it or not. That device is like 2.5 or 2.6 pounds, and this is like 2.9 pounds. They're close, but it goes to show you the engineering. What's impressive is the Titanium Yoga is Intel. I have a Core i7, though you can get it with a Core i5. So it's not it's an actively cooled system. You're gonna have a fan running, and that fan does come on. You do hear it, but it goes to show you that Intel devices can catch up to the Qualcomms in terms of design. You just have to have a fan with it. That's the only difference. But they're both super impressive. I don't know which one I like better. The Yoga has the Sensel trackpad that doesn't move, which is wild. It's titanium. It has a really nice keyboard. It has the track point on there. But the HP one is just I don't know. It's the best of both worlds. The best, I like the HP one because I use it in my lap on the couch if I have a blanket on me. You don't have to block the fans. It's kind of a big deal. But it also seems more ideal if you're on a flight. I don't know. They're both cool devices. So I'll be reviewing them soon. But obviously, I'm very enthusiastic about the Elite Folio. Zachary, I know you're kind of interested in this. Would you think about getting it?
Yeah, but not for $1,600. I think that's a bit. That's a high asking price. If it started at $1,000, I'd definitely consider it though, for sure.
Well, if you think about the Pro X starts at $1,000 without the keyboard.
That's true, yeah. But you can get, but with the keyboard, it's only what, $1,200. Okay, fair. I would consider it at $1,200.
Yeah, and I'd have to look at the pricing. Of course, the version I have is the higher end one with 16 gigs of RAM, 512 of storage. Interestingly enough, it is serviceable too.
Oh, really?
So
What way?
HP shared with me a video.
You're upgrading the RAM?
I don't know if you can upgrade the RAM.
I doubt it.
But it's definitely, yeah, I doubt it too because of how thin
You've already
everything
did the
is.
storage, maybe.
Maybe. I haven't watched the video yet. I'll drop it into the chat here just in case people are interested. It's not really recommended to be serviceable by you.
Right. This is like what Microsoft says with the laptop and stuff. Like, you can upgrade the storage, but you're not supposed to do it.
Yeah. So it's like, but you could.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I think it's more or less for HP and for customers who buy this, it can be returned or fixed and repaired, which is important to a lot of people. It's been a complaint about Surface devices that they're very hard to service, but this one apparently can. So, I don't like to choose favorite companies when I'm covering laptops because I think they're all doing amazing things, whether it's Razer, MSI's been doing some crazy stuff lately. Dell, of course, is just, they set the bar years ago with the XPS line, with the 13, and now the 15 and 17. They're all doing crazy stuff. I've just been talking about how Lenovo does things, but HP consistently has been like, their designs are just doing it for me. They're finally coming around to 16 by 10 and 3 by 2. This device shows they've really listened to a lot of the feedback and complaints we've had about the previous version. And they're just doing like cool stuff. There's a device coming next week, which I have. It's insane. Like, you've seen it, Zach.
Yeah.
Like,
about, yeah.
And then I came back a couple of days later. I was like, it does this too. Like, I was like, what the heck? And it's a feature I was just like, I never thought they would have done. And it's just like, I just like the way they look. Their keyboards, I think, are some of the best. Like, they do this thing, it's called corner stiffness they measure on the key when a key goes down. It's not just the center, but how the corner reacts. So some keys feel wobbly. They measure how stiff it is at the corner too. And it's because of that HP's keyboards feel really crisp when you type on them. And I feel like they're right up there with Surface. Surface makes amazing keyboards too. But like between the keyboards, the trackpads, the audio has gotten so much better. Their displays have come around. Like, they're just creating, whether it's on their business laptops, the Spectre. Although I think Spectre needs to tone it down with the gem cut. I know some people like it, but for me it's a little too flashy, a little gaudy.
Yeah.
But like the Envy, I think is amazing. So I don't know. They're just like, they're some of my favorite laptops to use. What I'm trying to say.
You mentioned all those brands there. Why are there different brands? Like, they've got Spectre, Envy, Pavilion, obviously the Elite series. Like, why are they different brands? Different, I guess, lines.
Sure.
And who are they marketed at?
Pavilion is entry level. Right. Envy is mid range, and secret here, I actually prefer the Envies. I think the Envy designs look amazing. I reviewed the Envy 14 recently, which is it's again, there's no other laptop like it. It's basically the size of a 13-inch Ultrabook, but it has a powerful 1650 Ti GPU in it. So you get the best of both worlds. You get like an Ultrabook that's actually kind of really powerful with the GPU in it. So you have the Envy line, which is they're all typically silver. And they also have AMD versions too, which is kind of cool. And then you have Spectre. Spectre is the prosumer high-end line. And so you have the HP Spectre X360, which is the X360 14. I would argue is the best all-around laptop someone should buy because it does everything. It's converted to a tablet. It's got you can get a 4K OLED display, which is insane. The audio is fantastic. The keyboard, everything about it is just perfect. And then you have the Elite Books. The Elite Books go into their business lines, and there you have the 800 series, the 1000 series, and there's I think some other ones too. The 800 is basically middle management, but you do get a little track point thing. The 1000 series is like, the real premium kind of stuff. I love those too. Those are just like really awesome laptops. They make a 360 version. And now you have this Elite Folio that's part of it. So, and then you have Omen. Omen is their gaming line, which is completely separate, sort of like Dell and Alienware.
Yeah.
So Omen is its own separate division, and they do all the crazy gaming laptops and desktops, which of course I'm using here. Yeah, and every company does this, right? So, was it Lenovo has the ThinkPad line? They have the ThinkBook line now. It has Think in it. It's business basically, and they have the Yoga line, which is the consumer version, and then they have now I'm forgetting their laptops for the gaming. Oh, poor Lenovo. I'm sorry, guys. I forgot your gaming laptops.
Oh, is it Legion?
Legion.
That's it.
Legion. Yeah, Legion. Legion. No, Legion. Yeah, so the Legion, and then Dell, of course, has Alienware and XPS, and then they have Latitude. So yeah, every company does this except Surface. And Surface has been struggling, right? So that's why you're seeing this bifurcation of like Intel and AMD and commercial channels and consumer channels. They're trying to, as they grow, meet that sort of demand because each market has very different demands. And Razer is doing this now too. Razer's built gaming laptops, and a lot of people who are non-gamers started using their laptops and be like, could you make it less gamey? So,
that's what the Razer Book is, right?
Yeah, the Razer Book 13 is their first attempt at that. That's freaking awesome. It's one of my favorite laptops. So yeah, it's busy stuff, but hopefully I'll do the Elite Folio review. Look forward to next week. If you're into laptops, next week will be a very big week. Not too surprising, but this one device I have is really just caught my attention. It's just really good. I also have to review the HP ZBook. Oh yeah, HP has another line, the ZBook. ZBooks are workstations, so they kind of fall between consumer and business. They're for architects, data scientists, designers, engineers, and they're basically the workstation. And so I have a ZBook Firefly, which is nice. It's got a 4K matte display. It has a NVIDIA T500 GPU, but it has just like a regular notebook CPU, so it gets good battery life. It also has 5G built into it, which is insane.
Nice.
And it has a full number pad system, if you're into that. It's a 15-inch device, so they also make a 14-inch version, which is cool. Yeah, ZBooks went from hideously ugly things years ago. They used to have those really thick HP bezels.
Yeah.
They were powerful, and the audio was like at the last minute. So it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna add a speaker one to it. They jam in a speaker, and you turned it past 60, and it was like crispy, right? It was so crackling. They've gone from that to like devices Dan wants to use. Like now I'm like, oh hey, this is like that Firefly. I'm like, this is a pretty cool device. So HP, man, they're I think they're doing it all right. And they also do really good presentations. So there you go. All right. That's there we go. 1 hour, 31 minutes.
Yes.
We can't escape that. Thing of the week. Zach, do you have a thing?
I do not.
That's a shame. You did nothing this week. Oh, actually, your thing of the week is we can't talk about.
Yeah, no.
The thing of the week for Zach is something we'll talk about like 5 years.
Yeah,
from now,
it's a story that once the dust has settled, we will tell it, but not today.
Yes. My thing of the week is something kind of cool. So I'm going to do a quick review of this somehow on the site. I'll probably put it on my Instagram. If you're looking at the podcast right now, the video, I'm holding up a stick with a white cube on it, and you may be wondering why. This is called Loom Cube, and they sent me this for review because frankly I could use this, especially I may actually travel someday again. And what this is if you notice, like we're doing this podcast right now, and I'm nicely lit, it's because I have a big studio light behind the computer here that lights me up. Well, this is a portable version of that. And this little cube comes off, it screws off here, and it's a little portable light that has a battery built into it. Now you can also, can you plug it in? Oh, you can't plug it in. Yeah, no, it doesn't have a AC plug, but you plug it in to recharge it, and it is Type C. I
Nice.
still see companies using micro USB. They were smart. They used Type C on it. And I'll turn it on quickly just to show you guys. You hold down the button, and there it goes. The light comes on. And you can adjust the brightness because it has a little slider on it. So it's like a little knob. So you can turn down the brightness to however bright you want. You can, and on the back here, let me turn it down a little bit here so I'm not staring at it. On the back, it has a little LCD screen. And that screen tells you one battery life. So when it's set down to it's like 1%, which is still it's showing light, this will last 15 hours, which is pretty crazy. But it shows you the percent brightness you're at, so you can set it up higher. But you can also control the kelvins on it. So if you're in lighting that you want a little bit more yellow or a little bit more blue or a little bit more just natural white, you can control that too through this button and a little lever. And then it comes with this cool little tripod, and you can screw it on either way. You can do it vertically or horizontally. I'll just put it back at vertical since I'm there right now. And then this whole tripod, of course, expands. And basically these little legs drop down and it expands up and it goes huge. So the idea then is you put this behind your laptop and then it nicely shines a light on your face and makes you look presentable. One of the millions of video calls all of us are doing every day now. So I am going to use this for when I travel because I still need to do video conferences. Sometimes I've had to do interviews where I was traveling. It's hard to get good lighting if you've ever been in a hotel room. So this is that solution. They also make bigger ones for your desk, so for a more permanent setup, which is kind of cool. They ran out of those. They were going to send me one, but I still may ask them for it because it's kind of neat. But Loom Cube, two separate words. You can go to their websites. This has it's a 22,470 milliamp battery. It's 9 watts. So, but it looks like it lasts a long time. Even when it's set up to like 80%, it lasts a couple of hours, which is more than enough for most people. So that's the Loom Cube. So if you need something like that, go check them out. I'm impressed and I'm going to be using it. So that was not a paid advertisement. I know it sounded like one, but it's not. I get sent a lot of gadgets. I actually have a really cool gadget showing up Monday, which I'll talk about Friday. I actually bought this one too, but I'll talk about whether it works or not. So Zach, nothing else for you? Anything
Nope,
exciting
I'm
for next
done.
week? Okay. Well, let's wrap it up then. We're going to do Q&A with the audience now. So if you guys have questions, start firing them off into the little chat there. Other than that, though, we will be back next Friday. You can listen to us every week at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on our YouTube channel for the live podcast where we interact with you guys. You can also watch us on video. Otherwise, follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, R-U, B as in boy, I-N-O, and follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN. You can always ask us questions there. You can also email me at daniel@windowscentral.com and zach@windowscentral.com if you prefer that choice as well. As always, though, thanks for tuning in. We have a lot of news coming next week, which will be very exciting, and we'll catch you then. Take care, everyone.
Yay!
Is Service earbuds a good earbuds for running and biking? Yeah, I mean,
It
I don't
depends on
run.
your ear shape. I've come to the realization that the earbuds are a uniquely designed earbud. In regard not just the outside but the actual inside as well. To the point where it actually doesn't fit in some people's ears. It's they're either too small or they're too big or because how the earbuds are I don't know where mine are. How the earbuds are designed is that they have they hook in like a key, but not everybody has this sort of area in their ear design where it can like grab onto. So, like for example, with my girlfriend, when I bought her a pair, they just fall out of her ears. They don't stick in. They stick in just fine for me.
And we're like, your ears are dumb.
Yeah, exactly. But everyone's ear is different. An ear design is like a fingerprint. It's everyone's is unique.
It is. It technically is. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I would
try
say though,
them.
if they do fit, biking definitely no issues with
Yeah,
biking,
yeah, I agree.
unless you're like aggressive mountain biking. But if you're, I mean, just talk about regular riding around, and of course they're good in that sense because you get to hear the noise around you, which is ideally what you want. So you'll hear the cars coming up behind you and all that kind of stuff. Running is a little bit more tricky, but for the most part, again, if Zach's right, if it fits in like mine are right now, yeah, you can totally run with them. They're very light, so they don't. And once they're in, they're kind of in. Like I could whip my head around like crazy right now. They're not going to fall out. Um, and you can wear them for extended duration. So yeah, uh, I'd say you'd be okay.
Is it totally out of the question for Microsoft to enhance the UWP APIs to the point where developers could more easily port their Win32 up to UWP and hence to Windows 10X? Well, 10X isn't happening anymore, so there's no reason to do that. But the answer, I think, is no. I think Microsoft instead is going down the Project Reunion route, which combines or tries to sort of unify both UWP API and Win32 API so developers can take advantage of whichever ones they want to. So if you want to build an app that only uses UWP API, you can do that. If you want to build an app that only uses Win32 API, you can do that as well. Or you can build one that takes advantage of both and pulls different APIs from different platforms, and those are also fully accepted. But I don't think Microsoft it would be. Yeah, I don't think Microsoft are going to introduce a new initiative that makes it easier to port UWP, port Win32 to UWP. I do not think they're going to do that.
Sorry. Also, back about the headphones part. I also am a big fan of when I exercise. I use Bose Sound Sport Freeze, and I think they have a new version out. It's again, it comes with different sizes. It hooks into your ear. Again, they work for some people, not for others. I love them. They're great. It's kind of a similar thing. They look kind of goofy too when you're wearing them, but allows you to hear noise around you and you get the Bose quality, right? So I'm a big fan of that stuff. So that's another option I would throw out there.
Is the Sun Valley event planned to be during build or shortly afterward as its own event? I believe it's afterwards. I don't know for 100%, but I've heard that there might be a Windows event in June or an event of some kind in June that's not build. But we'll have to wait and see what actually happens. What do you think is the future of Windows Core OS now? How long will it be before we start hearing about another system with a Greek code name? I don't know what happens to Windows Core now. I mean, it still exists and will continue to exist. It's what ships on the HoloLens. And I'm sure they will use Windows Core sparingly and where it makes sense. But as of right now, in regards to a version of Windows for the mainstream market, desktop is where Microsoft is focused on. They want to modernize that as much as they possibly can instead. I'm sure we'll see Microsoft attempt another Windows Core edition for mainstream markets in the far future, but that won't be happening this year and probably not next year as well.
What is the best laptop for school? I mean, that's tough to answer because
Laptop Go. I don't know.
I'm assuming you have an unlimited budget. For me, the best, I said already on the podcast, the overall best Ultrabook PC I could recommend right now is definitely the HP Spectre X360 14. The only thing that laptop is missing is LTE, an option for 4G, which that's a very Dan requirement. That's like icing on the cake kind of thing. Most people probably don't need that, including if you're in school. But that laptop, for me, gets great battery life. You can get the 4K OLED, which will every time you turn it on, you're going to drool on your keyboard, which is probably spill-proof because it's such a great screen. It flips around. It comes with a pen. It comes with a leather sleeve to hold it all together. You can ink on it. You can take notes. You'll get that full journal experience or OneNote. It has very good audio. Flip it around. You can watch TV and Netflix on it. And you're going to have outstanding audio, that 4K OLED with, the Dolby Vision kind of stuff. Like, it just does everything. If I was a student, that's what I would use. They're not that expensive either. Like, I think they start around $1,200, but for some people, that really is a lot of money, which is understandable. And that's a shame because that's the laptop you should probably try to get. But if you're on a budget, I mean, honestly, Surface Laptop Go is a lot of fun. I really like the Laptop Go. I like it more than I thought I would. That was the whole angle of that review. It was
Mm.
just like, this thing's actually a delightful device to use. Um, you don't get the convertible thing on it, but it's definitely more affordable. You're going to get that Surface quality, the speakers, amazing, the fundamentals are there, right? Amazing keyboard, great trackpad, nice display, even though it's lower resolution. The audio is very good. It looks great. Uh, and it's actually kind of priced more affordable. So I'm okay with that. But the HP Envy stuff, I like. I'm a big fan of the Envy line. So you can get there's Envy X360s. They don't do they do the 16 by 9 aspect, but you can get an AMD version, which is kind of cool if you're, really into AMD as well. So I think those would probably be my choices. Do you guys rearrange your shelves before each podcast? Absolutely not. This was like just long overdue. I had to redo my because it's going to be on Fox Business, and I just had too many controllers back there, and it'll look too goofy. So I just want to simplify it. All those controllers are now on the ground in bags behind me, so it's not much better, but it looks nicer at least in a podcast.
Windows Cloud Streaming PC for consumers 2021? Most likely, yes. That's what the rumor on the that's what the word on the rumor mill is at this time. Will they fix the duo screen from changing back to portrait mode from landscape after screen time's out? Maybe. I don't know. No idea.
How much of Windows Core OS can make it to Windows 10, Zach?
Well, they can definitely bring some bits and pieces to it. They already sort of have done. A lot of the UX layer, I think, is coming over. Although I don't know if it'll be C shell. I think it is C shell, but it's not all C shell. Like they're not replacing the Lego shell with C shell. I don't think. But regarding the technical underlying things, which I think is what you're referring to, they can do it here and there. I mentioned on the podcast, and I'll mention it again since I guess you didn't hear it. They can technically do things like state separation on Windows desktop. They can do that. That's a Windows Core advantage. They could do that on desktop. The problem is they can't really do it as an update. Microsoft could make a policy change for OEMs in a year's time or whatever that says, right, from now on you have to use this format for Windows Desktop on your PCs, which would then allow them to ship state separated, which could as a result maybe introduce faster Windows updates. But again, it's a big change for desktop and could break compatibility with a lot of stuff. So I don't know if they'll ever do it, but technically it's possible. Regarding containerizing apps, they could do that. I think that's a much easier goal for them to achieve, and that doesn't require reinstalling Windows. But I don't think that will be there for Sun Valley. I think what Sun Valley mainly is the UI and UX layer, and then all the sort of technical benefits of Windows Core, the ones they can feasibly port at least, will come to desktop later. Any chance of Microsoft stores reopening after the COVID-19 is finally over? I don't think so. I think they are gone forever.
I'm considering buying a Surface Laptop 4, and I'm planning to do light video editing from an external SSD, but I'm concerned that it doesn't have Thunderbolts. Yeah, it's got, well, I believe, Gen 2 Type-C, which is still pretty fast, to be honest. It really depends on what kind of video editing you're doing.
Yeah, if it's 4K or maybe you might have trouble, especially if you're streaming. If you have multiple videos in the timeline and they overlap and stuff, you might have issue. But you could just move the videos onto the internal drive, edit them there, and then move them back when you're done. I realize that's a pain in the backside, but that's also possible. Like from a GPU perspective, it should be able to do it. The Intel Iris is pretty good, and it will be able to edit those videos probably fine. But regarding that USB port, depending on the speed, so I don't know what the spec for Gen 2 is, and depending on how big the video files are, you might have a little bit of issue, especially since it's not Thunderbolt 3 or 4.
When is the May Duo update coming, Zach?
Later this month. We have heard a day, but I don't really want to say it because usually Microsoft is very good at committing to a date and then not posting it on that date. But I will say, let me look at the week. So hang on. The last week, the last full week of May is likely.
Yeah, they've gone from the first week of the month to basically the third week.
Yeah. Someone asked. Oh, I've lost the question now. Will Sun Valley be the last feature update that will be a full OS upgrade? I don't think so. If Microsoft is killing 10X and refocusing on desktop, I'm pretty sure that they've got more plans for desktop than just Sun Valley. Not that I know what's past Sun Valley. I'm only privy up until the end of this year. 2022 and beyond is a mystery to me. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Microsoft will continue to modernize desktop in any way they can going forward.
Do you think there will be a MediaTek Windows on ARM device ever? It's possible, of course. We've talked about this in the past that Windows on ARM, it's associated with Qualcomm, but it's not. I mean, they even tried to call it Snapdragon on PC years ago. No one bought that. But there's no reason why Samsung couldn't use its Exynos processor, make a laptop, or MediaTek too. I don't know where MediaTek is in terms of performance and porting it over to Red, because there has to be some work that's done with the drivers, presumably. And we don't know the status of that, but if a company wants to go down that route, it's totally technically possible. But I think because Windows on ARM is still in its infancy, it really is. It's still growing. We're still seeing devices committed. HP is committing now to this device here, the Elite Folio. As that industry grows and these processors improve, I think we'll see more companies jump in. What do you think the chances of getting an anti-reflective screens on next generation of Surface devices? Yes, I know Dan always points this out. Yeah, I'm so cynical at this point. I don't know. Like, to me, it seems kind of obvious, but it also seems to me that when I say it's obvious, it's probably because I'm missing something obvious that is a downside to this technology. I know there's issues with how they do anti-glare on glasses and stuff. It's literally like a laminated layer. If you're using a pen on the screen, that could cause issues, right? From what I understand, though, they can put it behind the glass so you don't have that problem. But I imagine there are challenges with making glass and how thin it can be and putting that behind there. Like, I would love to sit down with Panos and that team and be like, just tell me, like, why don't you do this? Because there clearly has to be a reason why you're not, whether it's cost, it's design, there's a downside that I'm missing. It's super frustrating. Apple has very good glass that is anti-reflective. They did it on the iPad. That's touched a lot. You can use a pen on it. I hate to be like, well, Apple did it, but Apple did it. And I mean, PC makers do it. HP does it. Dell does it. So it really bugs me because this isn't just a preference. There's a strong argument of human device interaction. When you're looking at a glossy screen, it strains your eyes because your eye is going to dart between what you're trying to read and the glare on the screen. You can't help it. If you ever noticed, you don't focus your eyes. Your eyes automatically focus whatever you look at on the fly. That's how human vision works. So when you're looking at a screen and you're seeing two images, your eye is going to dart back and forth between them. You don't notice it. You don't feel it until you do it for hours, and all of a sudden your eyes feel tired. Well, it's because your eye keeps going back and forth and keep refocusing. This is why anti-glare is so important, I feel, on PCs and why I'm such an advocate of it. It's a ergonomics issue when you're looking at a display. So why Microsoft is not there in front of this blows my mind, because you would think that's something they would be very concerned with, but apparently I'm wrong.
Where is it? Do you think that Microsoft will drop Windows 10 branding with Sun Valley by incrementing to Windows 11 or 20 or renaming it to just Windows? It's a good question. The rebranding is not the question, I don't think. I don't know an actual solid answer to this, unfortunately, but I have heard that they are planning a new Windows marketing campaign, and that tagline, the new Windows, doesn't include the number 10. So maybe they're just planning to call it Windows going forward. I don't know. I'm sure maybe it will still technically be Windows 10, because rebranding is a big deal, because it means you've got to update all the marketing materials. You've got to resort your search engine optimizations and all that stuff. It's a nightmare for everyone involved. But they could do it. I do think the changes coming with Sun Valley are big enough to warrant a brand change. They don't necessarily have to. They could just sell it as a free update to Windows 10, which I guess would actually be a much more positive PR spin, I think. But I think the name doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. I think the actual content of the update is more important.
Yeah, I agree.
When should we see a working version of Sun Valley in the wild? We should. I feel we should be close if it's a full release. Microsoft is currently in what I believe they're calling feature blackout. So unlike previous versions of Windows 10, where they're kind of just they put things in the insider builds whenever they deem them ready, what Microsoft has done is they're holding back all the big Sun Valley stuff in an internal build or internal branches. And are keeping them they're not showing them to anybody. They're working on the features. They're testing the features internally. But are waiting for a public announcement, an event of some kind, likely a dedicated Windows event, which I hear might be in June, to announce it all, and then they will ship it all at once to insiders. They haven't done this since the Windows 8 days. Like the first Windows 8 preview had basically most of Windows 8 in it. But up until then, it was complete radio silence. They hadn't shown us anything. But I believe they're doing the same with Sun Valley. That they've worked on Sun Valley. It's basically almost ready to go, but they've not put most of it into testing in the insider program. They're sitting on it. They want to make it a surprise. Then they'll announce in June. Then they'll go to insiders, and then they have from June all the way to September to test it. So we'll have to wait and see. But this is also why we think this Sun Valley is a much bigger update than in past years, because they're doing this. That they think it's big enough that they want to announce it on stage and have a big wow moment, like Apple does at WWDC, for example.
Someone's asking, not us, but I'll answer. Did Microsoft buy a CPU manufacturer? No. Microsoft is capable of and has designed CPUs in the past. And that's what the rumor has been about them with ARM and everything like that they're designing their own CPU. They won't make it, though, just like Apple doesn't make their own chips. They'll have another company make it for them because they don't have the expertise and they didn't buy any company that does that.
Windows 10 is said to be supported until 2025. What do you think happens then? Or will Sun Valley get another EOL date? Well, what I think happens is the closer we get to 2025, Microsoft will announce a new version of Windows 10 and just say, all right, this version of Windows 10 is now supported until 2030, for example. I don't think that's a big deal at all.
Couldn't Windows on ARM replace Windows 10X to a large degree? For example, wouldn't the Neo be much better as an ARM device? Two things. You're really confusing two things. Windows on ARM and Windows 10X are two separate things. One's an operating system, one's a processor. The other question is regarding Neo. Neo, I don't think will ever be an ARM device because, as I said during the podcast, the dual screen / foldable screen PC initiative is really backed by Intel, and they're kind of pushing it. It's definitely possible. I've spoken to Qualcomm about it. I don't think we should expect a dual screen or folding screen ARM device anytime soon from them. Like I said, it's going to take a couple of years, I think, before that form factor gets figured out. And so I think they'll kind of wait until that point. But, that's not a slam dunk form factor. But this has nothing to do with 10X, which was an operating system, which was technically would have been independent of the processor at some point. I would buy a Laptop Go if it had a backlit keyboard. Any chance of that happening with Laptop Go 2? Yeah, that was a big complaint. I definitely see that as an obvious fix that they could do to improve things. Like, I don't think it's a very weird thing that they did that. They did it to save money, obviously, and power. But it's sort of like when we talk about Surface Duo and like what we would love to see in Surface Duo 2. There's just some obvious things that they can do, that I think they're going to do. So, like, I think with Go 2 having a backlit keyboard, yeah, that's definitely I'd be shocked if they didn't, to be honest.
Is the Cloud Edition and Cloud Edition N SKU in the latest insider builds tied to Cloud PC, or will they be a SKU for low-end devices now 10X is dead? I would assume, based on the fact that they're called Cloud Edition, therefore Cloud PC. But I don't know that for sure. I haven't looked into that.
Yeah, and someone's also mentioning about why Surface Neo couldn't be an Android device because it would have to switch away from Intel, and yeah, I mean, there's that. I also think no one wants an Android tablet, let alone a dual screen Android tablet. That'd be too weird. And Panos has been pretty clear about that. Like, them letting Android onto Duo was basically to save the design of Duo. Otherwise, all that work, all that effort would have gone down the drain. But they kind of drew a line in the sand at this point, saying like devices below 8 inch, we can do Android. It kind of makes sense. Anything above 10, it makes sense for Windows. And they're going to probably stick with that until they change their minds. But yeah.
Right, a couple more questions, and I think it's time to head off.
What keeps Microsoft from shutting down movies and TV store? I mean, people use it. Xbox. I mean, a lot of people rent movies on Xbox, and I've explained this so many times before. The model for movies and TV is different than Groove was. The Groove, they had to have a grow the subscriber base to justify the cost of renting the entire music library that Spotify has. And those margins are so thin, it gets very expensive. But without phone, people just don't listen to a ton of music on their PC or Xbox to justify it. It's a very hard model to do. It doesn't work like that with movies and TV. Movies and TV, for the most part, is rentals. They only need to pay a royalty when you rent a movie. If you don't rent a movie, they don't pay anything. I'm sure there's a base fee, of course, but like they're not losing money just by having the store out there. And then there's the option of you can buy a movie. And when you buy a movie, you get a cut. Microsoft gets a cut of that. It's a very different model. If movies and TV was like Groove, where you paid $10 a month and you can watch any movie you want, the margins would be completely different. Then they would have to constantly making sure that people are hitting a certain threshold of membership to pay and justify for that. So the fact is people on Xbox do watch a lot of movies because that's in their living room. And people do it on PC because people like to have the ability to, buy or rent a movie, download it to their laptop, hop on an airplane and watch it there. It's how I use it too. And with Movies Anywhere, it goes to show you them joining Movies Anywhere was a big sign that they're going to be kind of committed to keeping it around at least. And that's how I use it. So. Galaxy S7 is a fine tablet. Okay, sure. I'm not telling you not to enjoy it. I'm just saying that look at the market. It's just Samsung and Apple's like 90% of the tablet market at this point. Like it's very niche. There are no really other Android tablets besides Samsung.
Will Sun Valley improve touch/pen use? No. Yes, sorry. Yes, it will.
No.
It does improve touch and pen use.
Does it suck to have covered Windows Core OS for so long and with so many articles and then just have it possibly go away?
It's part of the job, really.
Zach, did you get paid for all those articles?
I did get paid.
So?
Not by Microsoft, just to be clear. I got paid for the company that I work for doing my job, which is digging for information and publishing it. Well, it used to be my job anyway.
I mean, I wrote a lot of articles on Windows Phone and it went away.
Yeah.
But
I wrote a lot on Andromeda and that basically went away as well.
I mean, I still but to be clear, Zach and I aren't paid on a per article basis. We're salaried.
Yes, right.
So it doesn't matter if we write the article or not, we still get paid. So there's that.
We're being paid for doing this show right now. So thank you for tuning in.
Yep. That's why I always yell at people on Twitter. I'm like, when people get really passionate about like dumb stuff, I'm like, why? Why are you doing this?
My favorite thing is when people claim that we are fanboys who get paid by Microsoft, and then when we write something negative, haters who get paid by Google or Apple. It's like, how does that work?
You're like, oh, Apple's enjoying living rent free in your head, which I hate that expression. It's like calling someone a boomer. It's just like, dude, that's. Like, you're kind of lame just for wording it that way because no one does that anymore. But yeah, because I said a few good things about Apple, all of a sudden I'm obsessed with Apple versus acknowledging the reality. But yeah, when people sometimes I'm like, why are you so obsessed with this topic? And they're like, well, why are you so obsessed? I'm like, I'm literally paid to be on Twitter just to like talk about tech. Like it's my job. Why are you here? Like, why do you dedicate your whole life to like hating on Xbox? Huawei have fine tablets, but they can't sell them in the West. I mean, Huawei makes amazing hardware. Actually, I still have to review their new MateBook Pro, which is downstairs. God, so much stuff. I feel guilty every time. They make amazing hardware. I'm actually really sad about the whole China-US thing. I'm not saying, I think there is concern. Don't get me wrong. I think some of it's overblown. I think the 5G network Huawei concerns are valid. If you're going to have Huawei come in and install your fiber, like in your wiring and your routers, I think that's a problem. I think for people buying laptops, I don't think it's that much of a concern because you can actually buy the laptop, open it up, and anyone can dissect what's in that laptop and see what's going on. You can also plug it up to a network and do packet sniffers and see if data is leaving the device, right? Because presumably that's what would be happening. And no one's literally ever found anything from a Huawei consumer device that's been spying on people. It's never happened. But I get the concern. I just hate it because I think Huawei makes amazing hardware, and they were on track to basically take on Samsung. And it's a shame we don't get to do that, but it was nice to have that competition there. I mean, if you remember, they came out with that MateBook Pro out of nowhere and just kind of like, we're all like, damn, that was a sick laptop for a version 1. Like, sure, it kind of looked like a MacBook, but it was a MacBook improved. So.
Right, I think that's probably about that. About enough. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will be back next Friday. As always, follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.